8:10, and of course this morning, it's Tuesday morning, time for Creation Ministries International, and this morning we have Dr. Don Batten on the line. He's a research horticulturalist, or was a research horticulturist with the New South Wales Department of Agriculture, and he's one of those very smart people that has letters after his name. And yes, he's a PhD in plant science. Good morning, Dr. Don Batten. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Mick. How are you going?
Yeah, very good. It's great to have you on the line, and we've got some very interesting questions for you this morning.
Oh, wow, that sounds scary.
It's exciting stuff. I mean, plant science. You might want to explain that to us in a few brief words.
Well, we wouldn't have life, human life at least, if it weren't for plants, because plants provide all our food one way or another. Even if you only eat meat, the meat still comes from indirectly from plants. So plants are absolutely essential, but horticulture is actually fruit and vegetables and flowers, and of course fruit makes life worthwhile, because without fruit it'd be pretty boring. Just eating green things and potatoes and things, it would be a bit boring if it wasn't for fruit.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, spending 20 years with the Department of Agriculture, what sort of things were you doing there?
Well, I was doing research on some of the more exotic fruits, things like lychees and mangoes and custard apples and guavas, and so I was sort of responsible for helping develop some of the newer industries, researching things that might be blocking their commercial development. So,
yeah, and of course, with a lot of fruits these days, they're genetically modified. Can you sort of explain what that is?
Well, actually, I don't know of any fruit. Perhaps strawberries might be, but that'd be about the only one that is genetically modified. But
are avocados?
No, avocados are not genetically modified.
Okay.
And there's some breeding done, but that's not technically called genetic modification.
Mm-hmm.
But genetic modifications where, for example, with cotton. Cotton is very susceptible to a grub that eats out the cotton boll, the little ball of cotton, and it's absolutely devastating. And consequently, they used to spray cotton like weekly or every 10 days with these nasty chemicals. And there's a microbe, a bacterium, that produces a toxin that actually kills this grub that eats the cotton. So what they did was put the gene from the bacterium into the cotton, so the cotton actually produces the toxin that kills the grub, and now we have cotton that doesn't need to be sprayed every week, and consequently there's a huge reduction in the amount of pesticides being used in cotton, which is fantastic. And of course you don't eat the cotton; it's just produces clothing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no risk, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So then of course there's things like a type of rice that they produce that actually has vitamin A in it, and because the vitamin A deficiency is really bad in poorer countries, and so they managed to get vitamin A produced by the rice, so it's a yellow rice rather than white rice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of actually saving a lot of children's lives through having this rice that's actually producing that vitamin that everybody needs. So there's some really good things that come out of genetic modification, but it's where you take a gene from some organism which is not the same and then put it into the organism, say taking the bacterial gene, put it into the cotton, that's genetic modification. But I don't know of any fruit that's been genetically modified like that.
Okay, well, when it comes to genetic modification, there's some people out there that say, well, sure, humans are doing it to certain, foods and things these days. Well, how come, couldn't it have just happened randomly over the years, and that's how evolution happened, because of, random genetic modification?
Yeah, well, a good point, because the genetic modification requires an incredible amount of intelligence and knowledge to know what you're doing. And one of the things that concerns me a little bit is some of the people doing it are evolutionists, and they got this naive idea that accidental changes to living things are mutations, and accidental changes to the existing genetic information actually make things more complex and better. But of course that doesn't happen. And but if they think that way and they start applying that to their genetic modification, it could be a bit of a worry. But no, the genetic modification indicates just how complex things are and how much intelligence is involved in making them better, making them do something that we want them to do. So, yeah, good point. Evolution can't happen. It's because it doesn't involve intelligence. They have evolution of something simpler to something more complex. Some radical change in an organism can't happen, even given millions of years, because there's no intelligence allowed.
Yeah. We often look at, we've heard Dr. John talking about, animals and I guess humans, and how, genetically we're sort of slowly over the years we've been falling apart. And so have you sort of seen the same sort of thing in I guess, plants and fruits and that sort of thing?
It's happening to everything, and perhaps not to bacteria for a reason, but even there, viruses, for example, the H1N1 flu virus is falling apart. It'll happen to the coronavirus. It'll fall apart and become less effective at what it does. And so these things, they're all trending away from what the evolutionists need. And so it's right across the board in living things. Mutations are actually randomizing us and making us less.
They have their own website, creation.com, and about 13,000 different articles on there, so you'll find all sorts of answers to your questions. But of course, if you have any questions, any burning questions, we'd love you to send them through to us on 0401 949 949. And Dr. Don would be happy to answer them. Now, Dr. Don, you've been speaking to us this morning a little bit about genetics, and of course, on this segment, we often answer people's questions. We also talk about stuff that's to do with, creation, evolution, those sorts of things, and often stuff that's come up in the last week or so. And in the last week, in the news, there's been a lot about scientists completing a map of the full human genome. Now, I heard they started that years ago. I was expecting it to be finished the next day. I don't know what happened there. But the Smithsonian Institution, which is the world's largest museum, education and research complex, they put out articles from time to time, and everybody reads them and says, well, that must be right because it's the Smithsonian Institute. And they said, now this is before they finished completing the Human Genome Project, they said, while the genetic difference between individual humans today is minuscule, about 0.1% on average, study of the same aspects of the chimpanzee genome indicates a difference of about 1.2%. Well, that was before they'd completed that map of the human genome. Dr. Don, I guess, how close were they? Were they right?
Way off.
Way off.
Way off. And it's, the thing is that even a 1% difference would be a big problem for evolution, because we have 3,000 million letters on the human DNA and actually more on the chimp DNA. And if it was only 1% difference, it's not only 1%, that's like 10 million letters.
Yeah, right. So that's why they didn't do it the next day. Yeah.
That's just the difference. But that was based on... That was ridiculous, because they hadn't even sequenced all the human DNA, and they certainly hadn't sequenced the chimp DNA, and they made this pronouncement it's only 1% different, based on some very, very ordinary science from way back. And when they actually started looking at it in some detail, like the Y chromosome, when they compared the two in detail, the Y chromosome is what makes you a male, or if you don't have it, you're a female, okay? So that's why there's only two genders. There's only male and female. There's not more, because if you have a Y chromosome, you're male. If you don't, you're a female. So they compared the Y chromosome with a chimp and a human, and they were 30% different. And they said, "Oh wow, that's not what we expected." So then they started looking at the whole lot, and the difference is at least 15%, and possibly more. And it's a huge problem for the evolutionary story that we came from some sort of common ancestor of a chimp in the last 6 million years or so, because there was a paper published a couple of years ago called The Waiting Time Problem. That's the short title, The Waiting Time Problem. So someone can look it up if they want to find it. They can find it easily.
Yep.
The Waiting Time Problem. And it looked at how long it would take assuming that evolution works as they claim, how long would it take to get two mutations, just two letters lined up together on the DNA? Just two. Not 10 million, not 15% would be 15% of 3,000 million, because it's 450 million letters. So not 450 million, just two would take 84 million years, more than 10 times the time that they claim it got to get the difference. So there's no way in the world that human evolution from a chimp-like creature is even possible.
Yeah.
Full stop, and now they've finally completed the human DNA sequence, and this will enable a proper comparison, and I predict that it'll be more than 15%.
Yes, interesting how they came up with the numbers before they'd finished it.
Yeah, well, they're trying. There's a lot of propaganda goes out there, and propaganda is to try and encourage people to believe in evolution, because it's a very political thing. If you can get people to believe in evolution, they'll believe anything. So yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, you're on 94.9. It is 18 minutes to 9. We're with Dr. Don Batten from creation.com, Creation Ministries International. And we'd love you to send any questions through if you have them, anything in regards to evolution or creation. And, of course, Dr. Don is a plant scientist. So 18 minutes to 9. And we have Dr. Don Batten on the line from Creation Ministries International. Dr. Don Batten is a plant scientist. He's talked a little bit to us this morning about genetics, but I've still got a couple of questions, Dr. Don. One in particular is, I'm sort of coming at you from an evolutionist's point of view. Now, if they're sort of thinking, look, I still believe in evolution, I believe that there was a big bang out there and all this stuff just came together and all of a sudden something started moving and there was a little bit of life. Now, that little bit of life sort of turned into plants and animals. Now, they're both pretty different things. They look pretty different to me, but they're both alive. How could something sort of turn from a plant to an animal? Have we ever seen that, or have you ever seen that in science? Has a plant become an animal, or an animal become a plant? And is there any possible way that it could happen?
No, well, they're radically different, very, very different. You look at a plant cell under a microscope or an animal cell under a microscope, and anybody could see that there's how different they are. Plants have a rigid cell wall for a start. It gives them their structure. They can stand up. Animals don't have rigid cell walls. We depend on things like a skeleton, or in our case, or an exoskeleton with an insect. So you've got this outside case that holds it together, but the cells themselves don't have a cell wall. And there are many other differences. Of course, plants have chloroplasts that enable them to do photosynthesis. In fact, the biochemistry of a plant is much, much more complex than the biochemistry of an animal, because we get all of our nutrients from plants, whereas plants just take carbon dioxide, water, and some minerals, and they make everything from scratch. So plants are pretty clever in their biochemistry, whereas we depend on the plants to get all their vitamins and proteins, amino acids, almost sugars, all the stuff that we need, lipids, fats and things that we need to live. All of them, they all come from plants. Or they come from animals that eat plants, but nevertheless they still come from plants. So plants have got a very, very complex biochemistry. We have some complexities in other areas, like we have nerve cells and muscle cells and bones and things that plants don't have. So there's a lot of biochemistry associated with those, of course, but that's an entirely different biochemistry to plants. So you couldn't think of something more different, and to go from one to the other is inconceivable. So
I often think of microorganisms, that they say there was like the first microorganism and from there all life evolved. Well, there's a lot of microorganisms on the planet now, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so they should all be evolving as well, shouldn't there? In which case there should be billions of new things coming out all the time, because now there's so many microorganisms. I mean, back then we were just talking about the first one that became everything we have now. Why is that not still happening? It's
a lot more opportunity for sure. With with the massive numbers there are, the opportunities abound. But no, you don't see it happening, and it's just a real science, observing things that happen, and not imagining what happened in the past. And so, it doesn't happen. Nobody sees it happen. It's the law of biogenesis is something that was thought up in the 1800s. That basically that life begets like. So in other words, a dog produces a dog, a cat produces a cat, microbes produce microbes, and even the simplest microbe is incredibly complex, absolutely amazingly complex. It's just gobsmacking. The simplest microbe that can live by itself has got something like nearly 500 genes, and that's 500 different proteins that it can make. They tried to see how they could make that simpler, so they took away some of the genes, but they found out that they couldn't actually do without any of the genes. Their simple cells got nearly 500 proteins, 500 genes, and one of those genes is far beyond our ability to create from scratch without actually copying it.
Yeah. So, how much information would be in 500 genes?
You're talking about 500,000 letters on the DNA.
Yeah. Right. So it's taken. Obviously, God has put it together. I mean, to have those 500,000 just all of a sudden randomly come together and go, bang, look what we've just made. It's impossible, isn't it?
It is impossible, yeah. It's amazing stuff. So, amazing stuff.
Now, one other question.
Life is amazing.
Yes, another question I've got to throw in before we finish up today. When it comes to plants, now you've obviously had a lot to do with them. You've got lots of letters after your name, and you've studied them for many, many years. And when it comes to plants, over your lifetime, how many more are there now than when you sort of first started studying plants? How many have become new species of plants? Like, how many new ones have come out?
Well, a lot of new ones are discovered all the time, of course, because as scientists go into remote jungles and things where there hasn't been much the study done before, they discover lots of things, not just plants but animals as well, that haven't been known before to science. I mean, the people that live in those areas know them, of course, but scientists haven't actually written them up. So there's been new species all the time.
What about in areas that they have been studying? How many have sort of just, new creations are there in I guess, in front of our eyes?
Well, there's nothing new being created, nothing new arising. They're just being discovered. They're already there. So there's nothing new actually coming into being from existing things, But because speciation can happen, and we talk about that a lot on Creation Ministries International, but speciation is not evolution. I mean, you've got different species of wheat and things like that, or different species of cabbage-like family and things like that. So we regard some of these things, they come from the family. Really represents what God created originally. So God created a type which has produced different species, adapted to different environments, or that sort of thing.
Yep.
So don't let people confuse you that a new species means evolution. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's part of the same kind.
The same kind, yeah. It's just a rearrangement of the existing information. Sometimes the generative changes. You can get seedless oranges, loss of information, loss of seeds in a navel orange. Okay, they're good to eat, but it's not a new species in the sense of anything new that's going upwards, to give evolution a leg up.
Yeah. Oh, so whilst there's so much opportunity out there with so many microorganisms and plants and animals, it ain't growing bigger. It's actually getting smaller. Dr. Don Batten, look, it's been a fantastic morning. Our time is up this morning, and I thank you, and I'm looking forward to, hopefully we'll speak again next week. Is that possible?
Yeah. That's certainly possible. We'll make that happen, yep.
I'm looking forward to it because, lots more questions in there. Dr. Don Batten, thank you so much. He's from Creation Ministries International. Creation.com's the website. If you have any questions, you can go in there and find answers to almost anything you can come up with when it comes to creation or evolution. And, of course, next week, Dr. Don Batten will be back on the radio. So if you have any questions, send them through to our text line. That's 0401 949 949. Now, Dr. Don, you also mentioned that we have a giveaway this morning.
We do, yes. Anybody who does not already subscribe to Creation magazine, which goes to over 150 countries around the world and produced here in Australia, comes out 4 times a year. Anybody that doesn't already subscribe, if you could text in your details, we'll send you a free subscription.
Yep, that's the first person, right?
The first person. The
first person. And the text line is 0401 949 949. Again, 0401 949 949. You'll have to send your name, phone number and email address, and we'll be able to organise, and your address, for postal. So if you could send all that.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. That would be awesome. It is 8:57. You're on 94.9. We've got the news and weather coming up shortly. Thank you so much, Dr. Don Batten.
Thanks, Mick. Pleasure.